All right. Good morning, PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Cody Gingrich. I am on faculty with the Extremity Division coming on here for Clinical Tuesday. You might have seen my wife popping on yesterday for pregnancy and postpartum. And so I'm here going to talk about a step up during the functional exam. Before we get diving into that, I want to talk about the most upcoming extremity courses. So we have coming up in a few weeks at Onward, Tennessee in Hendersonville on May 20th and 21st. So Mark and I will be out there at Onward, Tennessee that weekend. And then about a month after that, both Mark and Lindsay are going to be rolling same weekend, West Coast and East Coast. So Lindsay's going to be out in California at Body Logic, and Mark and I will be in Rome, Georgia. So if you're looking at trying to jump into an extremity course, those are the ones coming up, kind of sprinkle all over the country. So if you're in the middle of the country, come on out in May. And then if you're looking more West Coast, East Coast, jump on in June. So where I want to start today is really talking about the importance of a step up, a good step up assessment during the functional exam, how to really make sure that you are doing a good step up and getting clean data from that, and also what kind of compensations are you going to potentially see when you have your patient perform that activity during the functional exam. So to start with, more times than not, you're going to be looking at someone to do this with is going to be more that moderate to low irritability. And you can look at this with both a hip pathology or knee pathology. So both of those two things can really get you keyed into using a step up as a nice functional assessment. Um, and the number one thing is a lot of times with those low to moderate irritability, you need to bring out symptoms. You need to bring out compensations in movement patterns. And sometimes if you're looking at like a squat or a deadlift or something like that, those things being using both legs, you have to end up loading them enough to actually bring out what might be going on. If you build up a step up to where it is challenging enough, a high enough step up, we can get patients to fairly close to a difficult capacity without having to go through the steps in time to build up and load their tissues enough to where you're bringing out compensations. So with most people, a 20-inch box is going to be enough to where you're almost getting them above or below parallel, depending on how you want to look at that. Sometimes even a 24-inch box. So make sure that that knee is up above the hip, if again irritability allows, to make sure that they're challenged with that. And so you don't have to give them a huge warm up to be able to do that because we're working with body weight, but we're getting close to what their capacity is going to be. The absolute number one thing when you're looking at this is getting them to, it's going to be a lateral step up. So they're going to be facing sideways to the box. Whichever foot you start with is going to be on that box. And the number one thing is they can use zero push off from that bottom leg. That is going to change your exam drastically if they even give a little bit of plantar flexion to give an assist there. And that's what you have to be super, super keyed in on. Otherwise, your data is not clean. If you cannot determine how much plantar flexion they give from test to test. So you have to make sure, and even if that is making them redo it, redo it, redo it. Nope, you pushed off. Nope, you pushed off. Make sure that they don't do that. Then that forces that leg that they're using the step up to really do the work. And what you'll see is it's challenging. It is really hard for folks to not push off when they are at that much hip and knee flexion to step up onto a box. From there, don't worry about cueing anything else other than say, you're not allowed to push off from that bottom leg at all. Using a video camera, whether you have an iPad or a phone or something to record them movement, is also going to be incredibly valuable. So have them do one leg first, 3, 4 reps, make sure that again, that push off isn't happening. Go to the other side, record both sides. What you're going to start to see is compensatory strategies in order for them to get up if that is a hard enough challenge for them. The number one thing that you want to look for is going to be when they initiate that first movement is the hip is going to swing sideways. So it's going to be going laterally out beyond where that knee is. You will also see a pretty significant hip drop from the contralateral hip. That's going to be where you'll see very quickly that lateral hip is not getting the job done in order to maintain a relatively level pelvis, as well as keeping their hips underneath them. So that right there is going to cue you into potentially a lateral hip weakness relatively. The other thing that you might see is their shoulders might shift towards that limb that they are trying to step up on. Again, that is another strategy to somewhat get away from that lateral hip and use a little bit more quads. So what we're seeing is that lateral hip is not able to maintain their trunk on top of their body in a neutral position, and they're having to really counterbalance themselves in order to get up. And so those are going to be really, really key pieces of the pie that you'll be able to see, okay, how are we compensating here in order to get that step up accomplished? If they have to lean excessively far forward on one side compared to the other, that could show you that, hey, maybe they are trying to use their posterior chain way more and trying to get away from their quad. So if you see one side and they get up and they're able to keep a relatively chest upright, it's hard to keep your chest fully upright because of the balance component. But if you see a significant difference in how far they have to lean forward in order to get upright, that can clue you into a relative quad weakness compared to them trying to use the full posterior chain in order to get themselves up. Don't be afraid to ask your patient either if, hey, did one side feel different than the other? Do not say, hey, was that side harder? You don't want to lead them into something that's not, but don't be afraid to ask, hey, was there a difference side to side for you? Did you notice one side being harder or easier than the other? And a lot of times that information right there can also give you from what they could see or feel. Yeah, that side felt a lot harder. I felt like I needed to push off in order to get myself up, where the other side, I didn't feel quite this as strong of an urge to push off, and I could actually get myself up. From there, if you have that recording, it's also super valuable for that patient to walk through with them. You can do the draw the lines just like you would any coach's eye with your cleans or your snatches or any other type of movement pattern that you would do that with. You can do the exact same thing here. Hey, on this side, we're looking at your pelvis is at a 20-degree drop. The other side, it was more like 10. So that matters, right? If we have the hip angle, if it's moving laterally, okay, we have this knee angle compared to that. And so showing that to your patient and bringing all of that to light is a really valuable tool to say, oh, yeah, there is actually a pretty big difference there. And then that helps you to kind of build that bike with them of like, hey, look, you're able to do a lot of these things at the gym, but more than likely you're using these same compensatory strategies, especially under fatigue, under heavier loads, all of those type of things. And if you're doing most things in CrossFit that are bilateral, there's a good chance that your one side is going to take on a little bit more of that work. And so bringing up and drawing all of those lines out is a really valuable tool for those patients to see, yeah, there's actually a lot going on that I might not even have noticed in other ways. From there, you can start saying, hey, when you have, let's say, lunges or box step ups or burpees, a lot of times if there's a significant difference, those type of things, they're giving themselves a little bit more push off and they don't realize it on that weaker side. And so now you can say, hey, when you're doing these movements, maybe slow that down a tiny bit and make sure you're actually putting force through the box instead of just jumping yourself up and over. And that's a way where you can start building strength just into their normal workout where they might not have even realized that they were doing those things before. And that's going to be the significant importance of that functional exam. Manual muscle tests are great. You can do a sideline manual muscle test, say, hey, try to hold me up against gravity if you're testing their lateral hip, or any type of a quad manual muscle test. And those are good and they might tell you a little bit, but that's not going to give you that functional pattern where if they are a fitness athlete or doing any type of lunging, squatting, etc., and they notice those things, like that's going to bring that out in a way bigger way than them laying sideways on a table and you just saying, hey, hold this up. That doesn't translate quite as nicely. So use the functional exam to your advantage, record it, draw those lines out, right? Make it hard enough to where that box height is challenging for them, to where they feel like they have to push up, but you don't allow them. Okay. Once you get through that stuff, now you start building out, okay, did I see a potential quad weakness here relatively, or was it more of a lateral hip weakness? Now you can start building out your strength dosages and actually challenge them and make sure that they're using those, whatever muscle you determined is the problem child, to build that up. So use the step up in a functional exam to really guide your treatment, and look for those compensatory strategies. If you don't have time to get a barbell out and really load them up, a high box step up can be a really valuable tool in your toolbox and be able to see all of those different compensatory strategies. So hope that was valuable for you. Use that on your next patient that you see that might need some hip or some knee work, and draw those lines out for them and really build the bike, and hope to see you all in the future.